Before we dive into these chilling tales, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling stories. There's a certain comfort we find in familiarity, in the rhythm of our routines, in the faces we see every day. But what happens when that comfort is shattered, when the mundane transforms into the unsettling? Tonight we delve into the chilling depths of unspoken terror right next door. These aren't tales spun from fiction, but real experiences, whispered accounts of the unsettling truth that sometimes the most terrifying monsters reside not in the shadows, but in plain sight. Get ready, because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at your neighbors the same way again. Our first story takes us to a quiet cul-de-sac, a place where children played freely on sidewalks, and neighbors knew each other by name. The kind of place where you could leave your door unlocked without a second thought. It was here, nestled amongst manicured lawns and freshly painted fences, that the Peterson family felt the most at peace. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson were the embodiment of their neighborhood, warm, welcoming, and seemingly without a worry in the world. They were the first to welcome new families with freshly baked cookies and friendly smiles. Their two young children, Emily and Ethan, were the picture of innocence, their laughter echoing through the quiet streets. Life was idyllic, almost unnervingly so. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. The darkness, it turned out, resided right next door, hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. The new neighbours, the Wrights, kept to themselves. Their house, a stark contrast to the warm, inviting homes that lined the street, remained shrouded in an almost perpetual gloom. Curtains were always drawn, and the lawn, never touched by children's laughter, remained an impeccably manicured yet lifeless expanse of green. At first, the Petersons dismissed their new neighbours' reserved nature as mere social awkwardness. They continued their friendly overtures, inviting them for barbecues, sharing gardening tips, even offering to babysit their son, a quiet, watchful boy named Samuel, who always seemed to be observing the world from a distance. But the Wrights politely declined every invitation, their interactions with the Petersons never extending beyond a curt nod or a forced smile. The Petersons, though slightly disheartened, chose to respect their privacy, attributing their standoffishness to cultural differences or perhaps a difficult past. However, as weeks melted into months, a growing unease began to creep into the Petersons' hearts. It started with whispers among the other neighbours, tales of strange noises emanating from the Wright house late at night, chanting, screams, and something that sounded eerily like laughter. Then came the unsettling feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following their every move. The Petersons would catch glimpses of movement in the Wrights' windows, only to find themselves staring at empty rooms when they looked again. One particularly unsettling evening, as Emily and Ethan played in their backyard, Mr. Peterson swore he saw a figure standing motionless at the Wrights' attic window, its silhouette stark against the fading light. He couldn't make out any features, but the intensity of its gaze sent shivers down his spine. When he called out a greeting, the figure vanished, leaving him to question his own sanity. Was it just a trick of the light, or was there something more sinister lurking behind the walls of their seemingly ordinary neighbour's home? Our second story takes us to a bustling city, a place where anonymity thrives amidst the cacophony of daily life. Here, in a towering apartment building, Sarah, a young aspiring photographer, found herself living next to a nightmare. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. The faint sounds of an argument seeping through the thin walls, a slammed door, the muffled sobs of someone in distress. Sarah, new to the city and eager to make friends, initially brushed it off as typical city noises, the soundtrack of urban living. But as the weeks wore on, the noises escalated, becoming more frequent, more intense. The arguments grew louder, punctuated by the sounds of breaking glass and heavy objects being thrown. Sarah would lie awake at night, her heart pounding in her chest, as the walls vibrated with the echoes of her neighbour's rage. One afternoon, as Sarah was editing photos in her apartment, a blood-curdling scream pierced through the air. It was a scream so raw, so filled with terror, that it sent chills down her spine. She rushed to her door, her heart pounding in her chest, and pressed her ear against the peephole. Through the distorted lens she saw a flurry of activity in the hallway. 2 paramedics, their faces etched with concern, were wheeling a stretcher out of her neighbour's apartment. On the stretcher lay a woman, her face pale and contorted in pain, her clothes ripped and torn. As the paramedics rushed past Sarah's door, she caught a glimpse of the woman's eyes, wide with terror, pleading for help. In that brief moment their eyes met, and Sarah felt a surge of fear course through her body. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of the woman's terrified eyes continued to haunt Sarah. She tried to focus on her work, to lose herself in the beauty of her photographs, but the fear lingered, a constant shadow in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the woman in the apartment next door was in danger. The arguments had stopped, but a chilling silence had descended upon the apartment, a silence that spoke volumes. Driven by a growing sense of dread and a flicker of hope that she could help, Sarah decided to confide in her co-worker, Emily. As she recounted the events of the past few weeks, Emily listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "You need to call the police, Sarah," Emily said, her voice firm. "Something's not right. That woman could be in serious danger." Sarah hesitated, torn between her fear of getting involved and her growing concern for her neighbour's safety. What if she was overreacting? What if she was wrong? Our final story transports us to a remote, mist-shrouded town, where secrets lingered like the fog that clung to the hills. Here, in a creaking Victorian house at the edge of town, lived a young couple, David and Emily, who would soon discover the true meaning of terror. It started subtly with strange occurrences that could easily be dismissed as tricks of the imagination. Footsteps in the dead of night, disembodied whispers, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. Emily, a writer, initially dismissed these events as her imagination running wild, fueled by ghost stories she'd devoured as a child. David, a pragmatic man, tried to reassure her, attributing the strange happenings to the house settling or the wind. But as the days grew shorter, the occurrences intensified, becoming more frequent and sinister. Objects moved inexplicably, lights flickered, and a cold, oppressive presence seemed to permeate the air. One stormy evening, Emily was home alone, working on her manuscript. The wind howled like a banshee, its cries echoing through the empty rooms. As she typed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, she heard a noise from downstairs, a soft, scraping sound. Her heart pounded as she slowly rose, her eyes scanning the darkened hallway. Taking a deep breath, Emily crept towards the noise, her hand trembling. The hallway remained shrouded in darkness, the only light from the storm-tossed clouds outside. She thought she saw a figure at the end of the hall, its silhouette obscured by shadows. Her breath caught, and she froze, her mind racing. "David!" she called out, her voice trembling, but there was no answer, only the wind howling and her pounding heart. As she stepped closer, the figure vanished, leaving her alone in the darkness. Emily's mind raced as she tried to rationalize what she had seen. Was it just her imagination, playing tricks on her in the darkness? Or was there something truly sinister lurking in the shadows of their home? Fear gnawed at her sanity as she made her way back to her study, her senses on high alert. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that they were not alone in the old house. Desperate for answers, Emily confided in their elderly neighbour, Mrs. Hawthorne, known for her knowledge of the town's dark history. As Emily recounted the strange occurrences, Mrs. Hawthorne listened intently, her face creased with concern. "You've awakened something, child," Mrs. Hawthorne whispered, sending shivers down Emily's spine. Something dark and ancient slumbers beneath this town, and it seems to have taken an interest in you." Fear coiled in Emily's stomach as Mrs. Hawthorne's words echoed in her ears. What had they gotten themselves into? And was there any way to escape the clutches of whatever evil had taken root in their home? These chilling encounters serve as a stark reminder that even in the most ordinary of places, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. They remind us that the line between safety and terror can be terrifyingly thin, and that sometimes the most unsettling horrors hit closest to home. As you turn off the lights tonight, remember these stories and ask yourself, do you really know who lives next door? Share your own eerie neighbour stories in the comments below. And let's explore the unsettling truth that sometimes the most terrifying monsters reside not in the shadows, but right next door.